Hello everybody.
Hey everyone.
So this is my wonderful guest. His name is Marc, and we're gonna give it just a few minutes in case anybody wants to log in. So we're gonna get deep in about 5 minutes. Okay. So in the meantime, Marc, welcome to my beautiful project.
Thank you.
Marc is somebody that I've known for years now, and he came to me long ago in a meditation because I used to teach meditation on the beach, and he wanted my services. And so, wow, what can we say about that? How do you feel that life has shifted now since then? When was it that I met you?
It was about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, about 5 years ago, I think. And I mean, at that time, I was going through a lot of change. I'd recently moved from Panama to Miami. I started with a lot of changes. That's when I started becoming vegan. When I felt inside some sort of like a call to more of a spiritual awakening that I didn't really know what I was doing, how to kind of start. I just knew that something felt like I needed more depth. And also around the time I started noticing certain patterns in my own relationships with other people, etc. And that's when I reached out to you apart from the meditating, and we'd hung out a couple times. And when I started to understand what you did through the regression therapy, the hypnotherapy, we did that. And I think as far as my self-awareness has really increased a lot, which I think has had a trickle-down effect and impacted everything else.
Everything, right?
Much better relationships, even though, I'm happily single right now, but as far as even relationships with friends, coworkers, etc., I think that has definitely improved. Understanding myself a little bit more and my connection with the universe and my own kind of coming to age as a spiritual being, all of those things really helped a lot.
Awesome. So one thing that he mentioned that I thought was really funny, and it's really, really true for him, but also for me and for everybody, is that you had no idea what you were doing.
No, yeah.
Right. So it's like you just kind of let yourself be guided into like, okay, I think I'm gonna meditate. I think I'm gonna try something new. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, but I'm gonna try it.
Right. Yeah. Someone just told me, like, when I first saw an ad for your beach meditations, I think it was at Plant Theory.
Plant Theory.
And someone told me go, and so then I went, and then I was like, wow, that was really cool. So from there on out, it just kind of gradually became more a part of my everyday life.
Awesome. One of the reasons why I brought you, I invited you here was because we, just like life happens, life separated us, and you went off to do your own thing. I went off to, of course, do my own thing, and then recently we reconnected again, and we had this amazing conversation where everything that I'm seeing on a spiritual level, like in my third eye, now that I've been like activated all these channels within myself, and I can honestly say I went from being a psychic to a psychic medium, which is just putting the volume up in your ears, in your senses. At least I felt like I was a little bit detached from reality because now I see the world in a different way. However, when you came into the picture not so long ago, like a couple of weeks ago, and we started talking, it's like you and I went through the same exact process, but you went through it in a different way. And so I'll explain real quick. So one of the things that he did was, and you're gonna go deep into this right now, is you kind of quit everything. And he's gonna correct me. So as far as I know, you pretty much quit a lot of things, and you started traveling the world. And then at that time, I kind of wanted to do a lot of that. I wanted to do a lot of traveling, but God was like, no, you need to sit down and you need to do the work here in Miami. when we both connected, we both realized that we literally have the same view of the world, but you were traveling all over the world and I stayed here. Can you tell us a little bit more what made you do all those things?
Sure. So really building on what we already spoke about as far as a higher level of self-awareness, becoming more spiritual, really, I think putting some emphasis on what was important to me, what made me feel good, when, learning to understand when nature's speaking to you, or when your higher self is speaking to you and what it's saying. So I started realizing, things that I originally aspired to achieve, that I thought would make me happy, were really having quite the opposite impact.
So they were not making you happy, can we say that?
Yes.
What were some of those things?
Okay, so I had been working for the same company for about 6 years.
Okay.
And from the time that I started in Latin America and then ended, actually I was back in Latin America but came to Miami in between. My salary progressively increased. My bonuses were getting better and better. I was being spoken to by my superiors because they wanted to promote me. And I was getting a lot of recognition. I was traveling, I was putting out fires, so to speak. So I was being sent often to Colombia, to Mexico, to the Philippines. And all of these things were getting me a lot of notoriety, not only within my company, but within the clients. So the client side of the people that I worked with.
Can you tell us a lot without mentioning any names? Because I know you work for a very, very big corporation. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about the company that you worked for?
Yeah.
As you were being sent to all these different places, and bonuses and everything that came with it.
Yeah. So the company that I worked for, to be quite honest, I had always said, since I started there basically back in 2012, that I really thought that would be the last company that I would work for. And that when I was ready to leave, that I would leave and then go on to do my own thing, or maybe work with a nonprofit. But I knew that was what I wanted to be my last job in corporate America.
Right.
And overall, I would say, as far as companies go, it was a pretty good company, especially during the beginning years when I was there. There's been changes in ownership and leadership and everything, and that stuff always has an impact. Large multinational company.
Very large.
Very large.
Very large. Very large. Okay.
And, there were a lot of good things, but at the end of the day, what I really started to notice was, and I've seen this in other companies too, some are a little bit more balanced, some are less balanced. The human side really is kind of back burner, right?
Let's say that again. The human side.
The human side of corporate America takes a back burner.
Okay.
And what you'll notice is, and especially if you're job searching right now and you're checking out, companies' websites and going to see what their mission, their vision, their values are, as you should do, right, when you're prepping for interviews and things. You'll notice a lot of companies will have catchwords like people first, and things that make it seem like it's a really human-focused company.
Yeah.
But don't get it twisted. The bottom line is the bottom line, and every company is out there to make money for the company, for their shareholders, for the board of directors, depending on if it's publicly traded or privately traded. At the end of the day, there's a small group of people at the top that their numbers have to be met, otherwise the people below them will start to disappear, get shifted away, etc.
Where did you fall in that category?
In that hierarchy?
Yeah.
I was in upper management. I was a director level,
Okay.
a global director.
A global director. Okay. Just so people can understand where you stand.
Yeah.
Like you weren't just anybody. You weren't just working for a big corporation on a lower level. You were working for the big corporation on upper level.
Right. So I was 2 levels down. Like my boss reported directly in to the COO, who was
Okay.
one of the owners of the company.
Right.
So yeah, I was like,
You were with the C's. Can we say that? You were
I
hanging
wasn't
out
in the
with
C-suite, but I had direct access to the C-suite.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's pretty close right there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you and I, when we were talking about artificial intelligence the other day, which I don't know how we even came across that conversation.
But it was so meant to be. It was so meant to be. Okay.
And then, you were saying something about like, it's not even necessarily the machines, it's more so when we think using like our logical brain as opposed to our heart and that type of stuff. And it really struck a chord with me, and it helped me understand for the first time the dilemma that I had, and part of the reason why I really wanted to leave corporate America was this disconnect between the supposed corporate values and personal values. So for example, I was making bonuses that in one single direct deposit into my account, I was making more than 3 managers would in a full year in places like the Philippines. And, and then the company would talk about, we would always, there were some very humanistic sides. I don't want to make it sound like everything was completely bad. But at the end of the day, our main conversations were around the profit or gross margin. And so basically the way that we calculated if a market was good for us or not was how much money did we get back, right? So we were an outsourced company, so our clients would pay us. And for places like the Philippines, our gross margin goal was a minimum of 60%, sometimes more. So what that means is basically for every dollar that our clients were spending with us, 60 cents of that dollar was pure profit.
Right.
40 cents would go to cover things like employee costs, the other things that we would need to run the company. So not your capex, not things like the building, but your other operational costs.
Right. So 60% would
pure profit.
Let's put that into perspective for people that don't understand, and I'm also one of those people. So like a 60% profit, is that considered to be like a lot, like a lot of profit for? I mean, it does sound like a lot of profit. But what I'm saying, it's more like what would be like a normal range, or what would be, so I can compare it to something, so I can have an idea.
I mean, really, it depends, because your profit margin is always going to depend on the industry, the market, and the product or service.
Okay.
I would say for a similar service that we would offer in the US, the goal was around 30%, but 22 to 25% was more realistic.
Got it. You see, now you're putting it into perspective. Okay.
Right. And so these are the reasons why so many companies want to move things offshore.
Okay.
To places like the Philippines or even in Latin America, because all of a sudden, instead of getting 25% profit, you're now getting 60%. And
what does that do to humanity? What does that do to people like us, and even people like the people in the Philippines, right?
Right. So for people like us, people like me, and I remember having this conversation with a couple of my bosses, and they were basically like, be grateful for what you have, and gratitude is a great thing, and I was very grateful, but at the same time I also felt very bad, and I had like a little bit of guilt that I was carrying around with me, because I was like, here I am
making all this fucking money,
and like I had like one of the sexiest jobs in the company, where we wined and dined our clients. I was on planes all the time, flying around the world, staying at really nice hotels.
I remember seeing the photos.
Great dinners, going to the beach, private planes, you name it.
Yeah.
And then, you have the people that are actually doing the work, like the frontline people that are doing the work that are making very poor money. Mm-hmm. Now, what does this do to other countries and other people in the economies? Well, it does a few things. It does inject some more money that normally wouldn't have been there. So it does help the economy to a certain extent. However, what it does though too is it creates a lot of imbalances. So while we would typically pay our frontline people, so entry level people, more than the minimum wage in the places where we were. That's how we could attract people with better English, with a little bit better of a work history, etc. In many cases, lots of times, those people were getting paid more to work with us than in their professions of being doctors, lawyers, etc.
Which is in a way, you're like, oh wow, I think I'm doing something right. I'm gonna go to this company. They're gonna take care of me. They're gonna pay me more than what I would, get paid on, those other labor vocations that you just mentioned. But
It's a good thing that way, but then what happens is when you work like that with a company, let's say with people in the Philippines, right? And they're taking care of customers from the U.S. or from Great Britain or Canada, wherever. Basically, we turn their whole lives upside down. So they need to work the hours that we're awake over here, and there's a 12 to 13 hour time difference between East Coast and the time in the Philippines, depending on if it's daylight savings or not.
Sure.
So those people now work overnight, and the majority of their family work during the day. They will do that 6 days a week, have 1 day off. Some will have, only work 5 days, but the majority will work 6 days. And so when you think about the type of presence that they can have with their family, many have small children, and so either they're not being present and they're not participating with their family, or if they are, they're not sleeping and they're stressing themselves out and they're developing all sorts of ailments and everything, because when they're at work, they're sitting down for 8 hours in the sedentary position, which is not healthy.
Sure.
And then, they're not getting proper sleep, they're not getting proper nutrition. And also in a lot of countries where they wouldn't offer 24-hour customer service or work on holidays, the capitalistic idea that we have in the US is we need to be able to have whatever we want when we want it. And that, I think, has destroyed a lot of cultures.
Yeah, I think so too.
I was an exchange student in high school to Mexico, and I remember seeing that there when I was there in high school at 2:00 in the afternoon, everyone went home and you had your meal together with your family.
I remember that, yeah.
And then you would have a siesta and then you would go back to work.
Yeah.
But now it's not like that. Now there's, Walmarts all over the place. You have restaurants that have their executive menu. People eat lunch now at 12 instead of having the big family meal at 2.
Right.
And everything's become much faster paced, and you've seen like an increase in obesity, an increase in a lot of ailments. And I think a lot of that goes back to the demand that has come out of the U.S.
Right.
as far as the way that we are with our consumerism and our
Right.
capitalistic ideals.
So I really like how you explained. If you guys didn't catch it, always rewind it. But I really love how you explained the chain of command and how all of that affects everything.
Yeah.
The idea of wanting everything now on demand is instant gratification. Instant gratification comes from the notion that you can have. I'm gonna get all psychic with you guys right now, but instant gratification is considered to be a darker energy. It's considered to be black magic.
That makes sense.
Right. Because the thing is that you can, by the way, you can achieve the same result in 2 ways. This is the duality of the world. So the duality of the world is light and dark. It's not that we need to always choose a side. That's not the way it works. It's just light and dark. So these people are trying to achieve long-term results in a short-term space, you can say, in a short-term space. That is considered dark magic, because that entails a whole other set of things that are making people sick.
Yeah. And I mean, I could go on that a little bit more. Like we had some of our centers here in the U.S. This is where you start to realize, if you think about the things that you're seeing, that a lot of what we see is smoke and mirrors, and it's just to give the facade that this is a corporate culture that really cares about its people.
Can you explain smoking mirrors?
Yeah, so
Explain it to them.
basically it's like a magic show. It's supposed to give the impression of something, but it's not really what it is. So it's not, you can't take it at face value.
And that's what a lot of corporations.
That's what I feel anyway, that a lot of corporations do. And I can give you an example of one thing that I saw here in the US.
Beautiful.
So I was at another one of our centers here, and they typically tend to be in more depressed, socioeconomically depressed areas.
Okay.
Because while they pay a little bit more than minimum wage, they're certainly not paying like the $15 an hour. They're between $9 and $12 an hour, more so on the 9. And then, like I said, you're sitting there for 8 hours a day. Last times I'll ask you to do overtime. They create, there is some team building in a sense of camaraderie among the people on the same level. Not really so much the executives with those people, but those people, right? And so I went to this one site, and part of their People First initiative was that they were going to provide free testing kits and needles for people with type 2 diabetes that needed it for their insulin.
Okay.
So you say, okay, well, hey, that's an expense that you normally would have to either use
say no to
insurance
that,
or whatever. Right. But then I go into the cafeteria that they had redone. They used to have an outside vendor that gave like fresh food, right? That sold lunch and stuff. They replaced that, got rid of that. So now there's microwaves, vending machines, and refrigerators where you can keep your stuff. The vending machines were like hot dogs and hamburgers that were in some sort of a plastic package, Pop-Tarts, sodas.
Super low quality food.
Super low quality food. And it's like, wait, you're giving them needles for type 2 diabetes, but yet you're poisoning them with what you're making available for them. You don't want them to leave because they only get 2 15-minute breaks and a half-hour break. That's not enough time for them to leave and come back. So you don't want them to leave because they might be late to log back in.
But you're going to supply them with soda.
And then you're going to supply them with basically venom that's, giving them the type 2 diabetes in the first place and high cholesterol, etc.
Yeah.
But then you're going to give them the needles that they need.
Right.
And, those were the types of things where it was like, if you, in my mind, again, if you were really concerned about people's well-being, and even though I'm vegan and I would love everybody else to be, you don't have to necessarily be vegan, but have some fresh fruits and vegetables.
Right.
If it's going to, offer chicken breast, but healthy, like fresh, prepared stuff, not everything out of a box or plastic wrapper.
And then the I could already hear the other side saying, "Well, we're trying to cut costs. We're trying to we're trying to do this and that." But wait, how many millions of dollars you guys make? How many bonuses? How many private jet planes were you in? But we don't hear that side, right?
Right.
We only hear we're just trying to cut costs. We're trying to shift things around. So as an employee, you say, okay.
Yeah, and at the end of the day too, I always think, I'm like, well, how much money does a corporation need? Like, how much do they have to have in their quote unquote savings? You know what I mean? Like, for families and for individuals, depending on the number of dependents that you have or people that you have in your life, when you die and you want to be able to leave something to help somebody, or you're providing for people all along, okay, I get it. But what's going on now is it's totally flipped from where it used to be. I remember, when I was younger, my grandparents were able to retire at 55.
Wow.
My paternal grandfather was like a handyman, basically all of his life. And, I don't know, I can't imagine as such that he made much more than a minimum wage, but they only had my father. My grandmother didn't work, and he was able to own a home, raise a child, have his wife stay at home, and all of that on what he made back then.
Right.
And then was still able to retire with a pension and his Social Security. Now there are no pension plans. there are no pension plans anymore, unless maybe you work for the government and they have some pension plans for certain positions. But basically, it's all private investing or savings that you have to do.
Which means that they're still making the money.
Making much more. And our salaries too, if you compare our salaries today to that of the early 90s or even 80s and do like the dollar change for the time, you will see that we are the first generation that is making less than our parents made. And companies are making record high profits.
Oh,
so,
wow.
And now we're also expected to work until we're what, 70 or 69?
65 plus,
Yeah.
honestly. Yeah.
So,
Wow. So that's another reason why I invited you here, because this is the person that you can get real facts with, because you're very into research and analytics and things like that. And honestly, this is why I really wanted you here, because I don't just want to give the psychic perspective all the time. I need somebody who's been there, been in the trenches, who's done the work, and then all of a sudden you appeared. So I was like, oh my God, you have to be here. That's kind of astonishing.
yeah. So going back to what you had asked, because I don't think I answered that, and just to kind of wrap up for these guys. So basically, 2018, I had been requested by the company to go to Monterrey, Mexico, to take over operations of a site there. And at first, I was like, okay, this is awesome. It's an awesome opportunity. And then I just realized, like, I wasn't motivated to get up out of bed. I wasn't like, oh yeah, happy to go to the office. There were some fulfilling things. I definitely prepared some people that were working for me there that were able to move up. I prepared the person who succeeded me after I left. And those types of things were good. But overall, I just realized this isn't my passion. I am passionate about customer service, but I could really care less if the companies that I was representing, my clients, if they made one more dollar or not.
Right.
And so those were types of things that I said, do I want to continue down this path? Do I want to accept the promotion that I'm being offered? And yes, I'll make more money, but what am I going to do? I'm single. As far as I was concerned, I was making more than enough money for what I needed. Everybody always says, okay, yeah, you can always have more. You can always have more.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you need it. And I didn't feel that I needed it. And so then some things were happening, some internal politics, which I really didn't like in the company. And basically what had happened is I was there, I had gone down reporting into one person. There was another person who was technically over the site. And those two, my boss and the other person, were both defending their people. So one was defending me and the other one was defending the VP of operations who was there. And the VP of operations and myself got along very well. But basically the way that they explained it to me and what it felt like was I was now being put on an episode of like Corporate Survivor. And it was like, well, you guys just go about your business and we're going to observe, and at the end of our observations, one of you is gone.
Okay.
And I was like, no. I was like, hey, you guys have specifically...
That's where the competition comes in. That's where a lot of envy comes in. This is where you kind of lose your mind.
Exactly. And so the gentleman and I that were basically being pinned against each other, we met and we're like, hey, look, we're not going to let that impact us. We're going to work together the way that we have been this whole time, and we'll do what needs to be done, but we're not going to let that impact us. And and I had conversations with my higher ups too, and I told them, I said, I don't like this, I don't appreciate this. And they were like, well, it's coming from the C level, because they're just like, well, we don't know who to believe or whatever. And I said, listen, I've been here for X number of years, I've done this, I've accomplished this and this. If my track record doesn't speak for itself, then offer me a separation package. I'm like, no, we don't want that. We want you to stay this, head, and the other. And it finally just got to a point where I felt that my self-worth was being impacted. I wasn't passionate about my job. I didn't like the way that the office politics were being played. And finally I said, enough. And I just, it took me a while. I went through a thought process where I was like, but what am I going to do? How am I going to eat? Or how am I going to afford this? What am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, they always say your past accomplishments are the best indicator for the future.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, luckily I have not been homeless. I have not ever gone hungry. And I've always been able to find a job when I need one. So what's, to make me think that I won't be able to do that again? And I did have some savings, luckily.
That's beautiful reasoning.
And I just said, you know what? It's time. And so I went in and I turned in my 2-week notice, and it was like the best feeling in the world. And so then from there, I took off and I traveled, started with Latin America, went to Colombia, Panama, then the northeast of the US with family and friends, and then went to, I'll run through the list kind of quickly, went to
Yeah, go ahead.
Portugal.
Let's show people. Let's show people the things. So, before you started traveling the world, like for real,
Mm-hmm.
you had already traveled the world.
Yes.
So I want to make that clear. But now you're going to travel the world
Differently.
your way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us where you went.
Okay. So I went to Portugal, to Lisbon for a month. And then from there, I went to Lebanon for 10 days. And then to Jordan for 10 days.
Jordan!
That was awesome. And then I went to Bali, Indonesia for a month. Then to Thailand for about 3 weeks. Then I went to Australia for 3 weeks. Then I went back to Thailand for a few days. Then I flew to Genoa in English, Italy. And I was there for about 3 weeks. Went to Spain in between Barcelona and Ibiza. About 3 weeks in Barcelona.
Ibiza, I love
and a week in Ibiza. And then I went back to Italy, to the south of Italy, in the region of Puglia, to a town called Monopoli, which is where my great-grandfather was born. And
We're going to talk about that later.
And then I wound up back in New York and ultimately Florida. So
what were your favorite, like where you found, we're going to get deep into this, but what were your favorites? Like something like, or like anything that where you started maybe just, or maybe like places where you just started like kind of opening your eyes more and being like, wait a second, I've been missing out on this amazingness or something like that.
It's really hard because there wasn't any place that I did not like.
Okay.
And every place had certain things. So, for example, my first month in Portugal, I'd been to Portugal one other time. And I really liked it. And I feel like that was a good transition for me to kind of, because it was still in a country that's pretty Western, even though, it's definitely different from the US. So I felt like that was kind of like a good transition to get ready for the other things. Lebanon and Jordan were both amazing because of the historical sites that they have.
I don't even know how you did it. Okay, so a lot of people think, like even myself, that Jordan is scary, that Jordan is dangerous. What did you learn from going there?
Okay. Jordan is not scary or dangerous at all. They are, it's a Muslim country that there is a monarchy, and as such, there's no separation of church and state. So, Islam is the official religion, and so there are certain things that we're not used to here, and me too, being gay, not being able to necessarily, I didn't ever feel that I couldn't like openly be gay or say it, but there aren't, like gay bars or anything like that.
Right.
So there were certain things you just needed to be a little bit more respectful of. Some people could say, well, it seems backwards and it's, very antiquated, and in some ways it is.
Sure.
But overall, the food was amazing. Loved the food. The people were great, and I stayed with a friend of mine that I know her from Panama. She lived in Panama, but she's Jordanian, and so I stayed at her and her family's home. And I had a lot of contact with real Jordanian people, so it wasn't like I was doing just the touristy things.
Beautiful.
And I found that they were very open, and even though like in public, like I said, you won't necessarily see like a gay bar, for example, people that I met in the restaurant industry and stuff, there was this one restaurant that's amazing called Al Shams Balad. And it's like a combination. It started as a florist shop, and so it's like got a florist shop, and then it's like a little bit of like an art gallery, and then there's like this amazing restaurant, and it has a little bit of everything in there. And like that family, I met the everyone except for one of the children, and you know the parents were both, I believe they were educated outside of Jordan. Their children definitely have been. The son recently had returned from Columbia University, decided, I don't want to do the stuff that I studied with, so he took over in the kitchen. And, you know, I just realized, and then the family that I was staying with, my friend, her father used to be the minister of health under the previous king. And he was also director of the World Health Organization for the Middle East.
Wow.
And, you know, I had an experience where I was taken to the Dead Sea in a car from the royal palace. So the current king, his uncle's palace, sent a car, and we went.
This is my client, everybody.
And so, you know, I feel like I got to see a little bit of everything. And then, like, we went to Petra and in Wadi Rum, which is, you know, Wadi Rum is a desert. Petra is one of the oldest civilization ruins that they have there are in the world. And so when I was there, we were in, you know, the smaller towns, you connect with more of your everyday people. So I feel like I also met with people from all different levels of stratosphere. And, you know, what I could notice was everybody seemed really open-minded and just loving and caring. You know, and that was one of the things that I learned everywhere that I went, though, was people at the end of the day, the majority just want to
be left the fuck alone.
Be left alone, you know, be left alone and be able to do what they want with their friends and family.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't mean that as far as like going crazy and, you know, having drugs and parties and that type of stuff, which I'm sure, you know, some people want to do that too, but just to want to be under any sort of a regime and want to be able to, you know, live their lives freely. And it was very interesting over there, also the conversations that I had with people both in Lebanon and in Jordan regarding the U.S. and our role in international politics and the different wars and things like that. And, you know, I remember when I was young, first it was the Soviets. The Russians were, you know, the evil, because I grew up during the Cold War. And so everything was like, you know, and then
that's what we were taught. You're saying what we're taught,
and
as
then,
opposed to realities.
Right. And then as time went on, the focus kind of moved, as the Cold War ended, to the Middle East. So now it's like we're led to believe
that the Muslims are bad.
Through the TV, through movies, through books, through our news, everything that that the majority are these radical Islamic groups, that they're terrorists, that they hate us because we have democracy, and, you know, all of these horrible things. And then you get there and you realize it's not true. It's not like that.
Yeah. I mean, I hate saying this, but like, I think we as a nation, we wanted their resources. So in order to get their resources, we had to put a bad name to them. So then it trains, this is how brainwashing works. It trains the human mind that lives in the United States to say, oh, it's okay to invade.
Right, because we're not doing it for the oil, we're not doing it for the petroleum. We're doing it because we need to set these people free. We need to liberate them from horrible dictators like Saddam Hussein
or
Gaddafi. Yeah, and, you know, nobody's ever thinking, well, actually, you know, like, what has the results been? If you look at Afghanistan and Iraq today, like 18, 19 years later, they're basically still in shambles. They're what we consider failed nations. And millions of people have died. Yeah,
and we invaded their nation.
Yes.
And they're still in shambles. To me, that says that we kind of robbed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I wanted to fact check that I haven't had the time yet, but I was reading something the other day, was talking about the situation in Libya. That when Gaddafi was in charge, supposedly there was a better level of living.
Okay.
They had their own national bank, so it wasn't one that belonged to like the Rothschild group that owns basically all the other
Right.
countries' banks in the world.
Right. So the Rothschilds are the bank. It's the bank group or the bank family that owns all the banks. So we're just
All of the
clear-
national banks.
all the national banks.
Except for
so,
like 2 or 3 now.
look at that. Okay. Sorry.
And that also any sort of slave trade, anything like that, was illegal under Gaddafi. Now they're saying that there's been a surge in human trafficking and slave trade coming out of Libya since we basically went in and
Yeah.
killed Gaddafi.
Yeah.
So that part I have not been able to fact check yet. I want to throw that out there, but I plan on doing that research.
I actually I saw a video of a man. I don't want to say Libya, but he was. I saved the video. I have it.
Okay.
But the video, I really like it. I mean, he made some really amazing points, but the video has a lot of curse words. So I kind of don't want to throw that energy out into the public, especially somebody who's trying to find peace and help you guys awaken. So, but he had a. I mean, I curse too, and I love cursing, but he did it a lot, and he was calling us stupid. But he had a point because he was just talking about he went on into saying how the slave trade has been happening. It has been happening in the open in not just the black markets, but in open markets too. Like it's very normal. I don't want to say normal, but it is happening, and it's happening with adults. It's happening with children, and then so he was saying. So this man was kind of saying, yeah, go ahead, go tear down Trump, you fucking idiots. You know, like basically saying that the problem is not Trump, that they're deviating us from the real issue by using the Black Lives Matter propaganda and the Black Lives Matter agenda. So what we don't know as a nation is that the Black Lives Matter agenda, even though it's bringing awareness to the racism that is happening in the United States, which is a beautiful thing. We need to bring awareness to that. It's also funding a bunch of shit that shouldn't be funded. Let's put it like that. It's funding the Democratic campaign. We are now realizing that the Democrats are not that much of our friends. We're gonna slowly go into that, but that's what we're realizing, guys. Like the Black Lives Matter campaign is funding Joe Biden. The Black Lives Matter campaign is funding a lot of things that are privatized that are just not ethical. And you can even look it up. I mean, you can go online and look it up. There's people that are doing the work and they're putting up this information. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it has all been a facade. And my dad, years ago, I've been hearing this for years, but my dad years ago was trying to tell me, you know, his family comes from communist Cuba, and I thought my dad was being paranoid. And my dad is like, no, like they're slowly but surely dividing us, and they're making it seem like social. So I do believe in some things that socialism is great, but what is happening is that they're masking things under socialism that they're saying that are good for us, but it's not. It's really communism masked under socialism. Like, yeah, we're gonna do something good for you guys, and we're gonna provide for you guys, but at the end of the day, they're taking away more and more of our freedoms. I didn't want to believe that. And my dad and both of my parents told me that. They're like, look, this is what's going on. Like, we are not Democrats anymore. Even my parents. I'm like, that's ridiculous. How are you guys Republican? You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. I did not respect my family, and now it turns out that the joke was on me because it seems to be the reality. Another thing I want to point out, though, because we're going to get into a political talk, is the purpose of this talk is for you guys not to necessarily choose a side. Okay, the purpose of us talking here is for you to just try to understand each perspective And then you later on, after you make your research and whatever it is that's going on in your life, then you can choose a side. But the reality is that none of them are good. Like, I don't really think any of them are good. You know, this is the reality that I want to point out. There's a lot of things that are going to start to come out that are going to show us the realities of this. But I do want to stress is that I do feel like the joke was on me with the Democratic Party. I feel like I know for a fact that they're playing games with us, that it's a chess game, that they're all friends, they're all best friends, they're all doing a lot of underground secret operations that I even saw, and they're doing things that are just really, really, really unethical, and all that stuff is going to soon start to come out into the surface, which we're going to start to talk about now. Yay. Okay, so anything else that you want to mention about your travels? Okay, so let's mention the findings of humanity.
Okay. So I think, that experience, I traveled for a little over a year. Overall, like I said, as far as what I realized from humanity is that we are much more alike than we are different. And while I'm certainly a proponent of abundance and wealth, they take on different meanings now. Because abundance doesn't necessarily mean having more than what you need, like having a lot more than what you need, but it's more of having what you need. And the same thing with wealth. Wealth is about do you have what you need? And I don't mean necessarily food and shelter, but are you happy? Do you have a passion? Do you have something that makes you feel useful? Do you have a purpose in life? Do you have somebody to love? Those types of things to me make a person more wealthy.
Right.
And
that is the wealth consciousness, by the way. And
I realized, more and more as I started traveling, I started getting rid of things. So, I started in February in Portugal, and so it was cold, it was winter, and as time got moved on, I was either shipping some things home with different people or giving things away. And by the end, and before I left, I had put a lot of my stuff here in storage. I had sold some stuff, and then I came back and I'm getting, my house luckily now is under contract. It's being sold.
His house sold.
But I used to have so much stuff, and I never considered myself like a hoarder or somebody who bought things to try and fill some sort of to fill some sort of an emotional void. But even though I wouldn't consider myself that, I still realized, I'm a single guy. I had 3 blenders and 3 food processors. Why? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so those I started giving away.
How many shoes can you fucking have?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I realized, that I can do better and I am happier with less. So that was one of the biggest findings for myself. And which was good because now I'm not afraid like I was before. I was afraid to quit my job at first because of that, economic stability and stuff. And I'm like, well, one, I don't need as much as what I used to have. And now that I've had less income coming in, I'm actually spending a lot less. And I wouldn't say that it was because I have less to spend, but I've realized that the things that make me happy and that fulfill me aren't really the things that are costing a lot of money.
Right.
So that I learned, and I feel like that is prevalent and true and noticeable in a lot of other countries where we don't have, the U.S. is become very plastic in a lot of ways, and I don't mean to sound overly judgmental, but we find more meaning and more happiness in likes on Instagram or buying the latest shoes or having the best car, getting your lips done,
getting your butt done,
than in being able to be with your friends and family and have a good meal and all share and live together type of deal.
Right.
So those were the major things that I learned, and I learned that I want to be more a part of that world than I do of this world.
Right. When I was in the car, so funny enough, it's like you. By the way, you're taking the trip that a lot of people, or you did it in a conscious way. A lot of people that are watching this or are going to be watching this, I'm sure life has put them in a somewhat struggling situation where they have to completely redefine their life. For me, it was a little bit of both. I wanted to go into a certain direction, and then the universe is like, okay, yeah, we want to take you there, but you first have to go to this direction. So things weren't working out for me, and then it's like I got the cue, and I was like, oh wait, I have a learning thing to do, and this is telling me I need to get rid of everything. So you did it. It's like you did it unconsciously. Some things you did it unconsciously yet conscious, and some things the same thing. Like I felt like I was kind of forced, but then I kind of woke up and said, oh no, wait, this is just part of the deal. So I was able to like sell all my shit knowingly that I was headed somewhere. I wasn't quite sure where I was going. I didn't know at that time. God didn't tell me to get in the car, but it sure told me you're going somewhere, so we need you to sell all your shit, you know. In that process, again, I didn't know I was going to be in the car, but it still hits you that you're attached to all these things.
Right.
And then when it was very hard for me to say goodbye to some of those things. By the way, if you want to make more money, I'm going to give you the secret that I tell all my clients, because there are no secrets. Give your stuff away. Yeah. Well, what I did was before I gave stuff away, or before things would sell, because things weren't selling, I would do forgiveness. So like something would come up in my mind. It was sometimes it was related, sometimes it wasn't related, but I would feel a certain feeling of sadness, and then I would like do the forgiveness work. On the dot, I would sell the item and I would make more money. And this is honestly what I teach all my clients. I'm like, listen, you want to make more money? Fucking forgive. Forgive whatever it is that you haven't forgiven, because that's baggage. So for more money or the abundance to come into your life, you have to let go of the baggage. And sometimes, and not sometimes, both the baggage is energetic and physical.
Yes.
Because the physical is also energy, but it starts in the non-physical and then it moves on to energy. So we're giving you guys some pointers in case you're going through a hard time, and understanding that it is part of it. And maybe you're going to be much, 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 much happier when you actually get rid of the shit, you know? And then when I got rid of the shit, I was sad for like 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden it was like okay, that was it. That's done. It was like a new me being born every time I would give away something, because the attachment was gone, and then all of a sudden I wasn't even sad anymore. I wasn't anything. I was back to normal, and I felt lighter and happier. Right. So this is how two people literally went through the same process. I just did it here in Miami, and you did it all over the world. Awesome. All right. So I want to get into there are two topics that I really want to get into, but anyway, let's get into the political topic, because I really want to dive into that. And I know it's 53 minutes. We normally, I stop it at 1:30 because we're going to get tired, and I try to keep it at 1 hour, but sometimes the conversations
go over.
Right. It's so good, and I know people can get a lot of this. All right, so what do you think about Trump? How do we start? What do you think about Trump? What have you realized about this whole political thing? Let's go.
I want to preface this with something first, and then I'll talk about Trump.
Go ahead.
So one thing, you'll hear people lots of times say, wow, reality is so much crazier than fiction. And I think that's true.
That's very true.
I think that's something to keep in mind. Another thing is if you like history at all, then I recommend reading some books, watching some documentaries, or even some shows that aren't necessarily correct 100%, that could be fictional, but that are based on a certain historic time.
Okay.
I think that that's a good idea. And the reason why I bring that up is now if you think anything that doesn't fit inside this box that we've been given by the media, then you are a crazy, lunatic conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Which they exist too, right?
Right.
But it's almost like you're not allowed to think of these other things.
Right.
Now, we know, right, according to history,
Right.
kings and queens had people killed all the time. For different reasons. Kings and queens and royal families were incestuous because they didn't want to break the bloodline. The Pope was able to have, what I forget the fancy word that they call them, courtesans, which was basically prostitutes, that would be with the Pope at different times.
That's history, people.
They married. They killed people. They did all of these things for land, for the most part, land and gold. And then when they discovered the Americas and they discovered the Indias, then you had wars over spices and silk. So my point in bringing that up is to say that if people think that it's so crazy that people would do things for pharmaceuticals or oil or land today, then I would say, wake up, go read your history.
Right.
Because the time, that we're living in today, there is more media coverage, there's more of all of that. But to think that, and I'm not making any accusations, but just to say hypothetically that a reigning family in the US, like maybe the Clintons, that it would be so unthinkable that they have had people killed to have them removed out of their way.
Right.
Why do we think that that's so hard to believe? How is that so incomprehensible? But yet we know what our forefathers did, what our past did. So
those are things from, by the way, those are things from history that they don't want us to know.
Right.
So those are things in history that are not mentioned in many ways, which is why it's good to watch historical movies based on that, because historical movies really try to bring in facts. But yet we still think that there's some fiction to it because it's a movie.
Yeah, and even if you want to see something that's more real life or modern day, where you can see some of what the U.S. has done, what our role has been, I would recommend the movie about the Panamanian boxer Duran. I think it was called Iron Fist in English. But there it talks a lot about like the U.S. invasion, what we did. There was a massacre when the U.S. soldiers started killing high school students in Panama that were trying to put up the Panamanian flag. So it just gives you I think that the film was done very well. It was a mix between a Panamanian production and a U.S. production, so I feel like you get a pretty objective side of it. But you certainly see things that they're not telling you in high school or college here.
Right.
So now to your question about what do I think about Trump.
So that was a great opener, right? Well, because the thing is that, like you said, we are told that we need to think in this box, and you know what that box is called? CNN. That's what the box is called. Okay, that's what a lot of people love to watch because that's what we think is accredited, and it looks very accredited, so we watch it, right?
Right. Yeah, but when you think of that, all the media houses in the States are owned by 6 different companies or 6 individuals. You can see the control.
Right.
So I'll be honest, I didn't speak with my sister for a year after the 2016 elections because she voted for Trump and I was absolutely against him. And so I didn't even go to her house for Thanksgiving that year. And
I like that. This is somebody who was very against Trump. Like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like it, and I'm sorry you didn't speak to your sister, and I'm sorry that happened. But this is a good example of what happens. Right, and the separation, and
And I used to live in New York City, and I did a lot of high-end catering gigs and things like that. And I'd actually waited on Trump before, and on his ex-wife Ivana rather, and. So I've had some interactions, and I just thought that he kind of seemed like an asshole. And then when he started running, one thing that seemed weird to me though was the fact that he was running with the Republican Party because what I knew of his persona, he seemed to be much more what we considered Democrats to be, what I considered myself to be, and others to be. So I thought that was very strange, and I was pretty much against him up until recently. And then what I started noticing was, especially during the whole lockdown, you know, I went into quarantine a little bit earlier than most because I was in Spain for the first part of it.
That's right.
And I started seeing all these things on social media. And I realized, you know, one of the things that I would criticize people of and you know, always tell my employees to do, and then I started realizing that I wasn't doing it, was to read and do kind of like my own research. And so what I realized was that half of the time, people are sharing stories that they find on Facebook, specifically, or Twitter. I only use Facebook and Instagram.
Sure.
But that would repost things, and the headline is very deceiving most of the time, and it's like a deceitful headline, but it's very catchy, and it's very sensational. It causes a lot of sensationalism to get people really, you know, worked up.
Like Trump cut off all the, what is it? What was the latest headline? Trump cut off the LGBT trans, the law, and now they can't get the healthcare they really need. Or that's very impactful.
Yes.
Okay.
And you know, and even before that, when they were talking about his executive order, this was the one that I did the most research on, so I could speak to it a little bit more. But the executive order around social media. So the way that it came out across the media here was that 2 days before, Trump had some of his tweets marked by Twitter as possible, like, you know, needed to be fact checked or it was fake news or whatever. And then like 2 days later, he comes out with this executive order. Well, the way that the mass media played it up and the social media platforms played it up was that he basically threw an adult-sized temper tantrum because he didn't like the fact that Twitter like marked his comments, and so then 2 days later he is attacking our freedom of speech and our freedom of expression by putting out an executive order. Well, first thing, an executive order can't be written usually in 2 days. I mean, possibly if you had absolutely no concern for the Constitution or, you know, didn't want to fact check anything, then I mean, it certainly could be written in less time, but most of the time it's not. And so I read, it was only like an 8-minute read. I read the executive order from top to bottom. There was one paragraph where it sounded like Trump had probably written that paragraph himself, and where there was nothing substantial that came out of that paragraph. It was more so like him blowing off steam.
Sure.
But the rest of it, I think, was one of the greatest things, if we want to call it a piece of legislation or whatever, that has passed since I've been born anyway.
Okay.
That actually protects freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
Okay.
And, you know, everybody was up in arms about the possible involvement of foreign countries like Russia in the last elections and things like that. And especially, you know, Democrats. So this bill, what it does is a few things. One, it says that social media outlets like Facebook, Twitter, etc., even though they are privately held companies, have become so far stretching that, and there's so many people that use them, that in this day of modern technology where people interact more online than they do in person, that they have become like the de facto town square. So back, you know, in the 1800s, early 1900s, people would go to the town square to talk and find out what was going on and get their news, get the newspaper.
Sure.
Well, now people wake up and one of the first things that we do is we grab our cell phone and we look at social media. So they're saying, okay, even though it's private, it has this resemblance of like a town square. So it needs to be managed that way to protect our freedom of speech.
Right. I'm gonna put it in layman's terms. It's ratchet information. Okay, so basically, they're saying that the information is just ratchet and it's not valid. That's what they're saying.
Well, and so, but that you should be able to express what you want and say what you want, within certain confines. So obviously, like, no hate speech, things like that. But that it's not for these social media houses to determine what's fake news and what's real news or whatever, and to delete things and take things down. That was one thing. So that to me already says, okay, Democrats are out there now saying that this is the worst thing ever, but if what you want to do is protect freedom of speech, then that to me is a good thing, because you're saying, okay, I'm not going to let some fact checkers that were hired by Facebook who were probably 20 years old,
Right.
and first job out of college, determining that have very little life experience and probably didn't read the history books and stuff that we did back when we were in school, telling me like, no, that's not true.
Right.
And most of the stuff aren't things that can scientifically be proven absolutely one way or the other. So that's why there's, I think truth is really a spectrum of gray.
It is, truth is a spectrum, absolutely.
And then one of the other things was around how much governments can spend on Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms for advertising, because we know that they have algorithms that they can target specific people and specific groups.
Sure.
And this actually came out of a congressional hearing, and Mark Zuckerberg was speaking himself about how, yes, it's possible that if a political campaign wanted to target a certain group, so you could say, let's target lower socioeconomic people, black people in inner cities, and that would typically vote one way, say Democrat or whatever, and I'm in the Republican Party, and I don't want the Democrats to get their vote, so I could create an ad that, based off of algorithms, would target that group of people specifically, and I could put in there that the election day was a different day or a different time or at a different location than what it really was, so that you could manipulate people that way, and there would be quote unquote like voter fraud, but it wasn't considered voter fraud because this was a private company that somebody else is paying private money to go and do these ads. So those were types of things that could happen.
Wow.
So now, through part of this executive order, all countries, including our own government, foreign governments, etc., are limited to the amount of money that they can spend on ads with social media.
Wow.
So these were all things that I'm like, this is great.
If anything, it helped. It helped.
And I started having a discussion, and I posted on Facebook, before everybody flips out and goes crazy about this, please actually read. And I posted the link to the executive order. I'm like, it's an easy read it, and then let me know what you think. And my friends that, before had all, we considered ourselves liberals and Democrats, whatever,
Sure.
just started attacking it and attacking me. And I was like, but did you read it?
Did
and then
you
they would
read
go
it?
on and they would say more, but did you read it? But did you read it? And the answer was no, they hadn't read it. And, so I told one of them, I said, listen, if you can't take the few minutes to read it, then I'm sorry, but your opinion isn't valid.
Right.
And then somebody else later finally admitted, he's like, I did read it. He's like, and yeah, I don't have anything negative to say about the executive order, but I just don't like that it's coming from Trump. So.
That's a personal issue.
Yeah. Now, I don't, he's a privileged white man in his 70s. So I would say that he probably, and I don't know him, but when I saw him 20 some odd years ago in New York, and he was getting out of an elevator with two chicks, like one on each arm, I think there's certain things that we can probably assume, as far as his views on feminism or whatever. As far as race goes, he is from, spent most of his life and is from New York, I believe, so he's been around different races. I've read letters, like there was a letter that Russell Simmons, I believe, wrote to him when he first, became president, that said, what's going on, because your public persona is taking on this thing of like that you are racist, but you're not a racist. Like, I've known you for I don't know how many years, and you're not a racist. So I really don't know. I would say, if anything, he's probably more classist. Probably more doesn't care what color you are, cares how much money you have.
Right. I kind of feel that more on
So,
that aspect.
I think as a person, like anybody, he probably has some really redeeming qualities, and then he probably has some others that aren't so good.
Right.
I do believe that the press has not treated him fairly. And most of the time, sometimes I've watched some live speeches and he does sound like an idiot, and I think it's just he's stumbling over his words and he doesn't sound that smart. But then other times he sounds very smart. And when I've watched older interviews, like with Barbara Walters and stuff, he sounds very intelligent.
He's an incredibly intelligent.
And
He's one of the owners of the world. Come on, people.
Yeah.
That's why he doesn't give away his taxes.
And so, I do think that a lot of things are being hidden from us. A lot of things are being leaked out to us in deceptive ways with deceptive headlines. And unfortunately, in this age of technology, one of the things that studies show is that the average person has an attention time span of 2 to 3 seconds, because we're constantly going like this through our social media feeds.
Yeah.
So that's why people won't actually click on the link and open the article
And read it.
and read it and
Take
do
the time, analyze it, feel it.
critical understanding, critical thinking, and coming. No, they're going through, scrolling through. You've got
I
2
already
seconds.
know the news.
Yep, you got 2 seconds to grab their attention, and that's what's deceitful and deceptive.
Yeah.
And so I do think that based off of the things that I've been reading and doing my own research on, that it seems like Trump is actually trying to make America great again.
This is coming from somebody who really dislikes Trump.
Yeah.
I'll give you my opinion on Trump in a second. I'm not for one way or for another, honestly, but yeah.
In some ways, I'm not sure. I need to study more on his tax plan and tax cuts. I do see some nepotism, obviously, in his administration.
What's nepotism?
Nepotism is when you show favoritism towards family members.
Well, that's always going to be that.
And so that's always going to be there. It might be a lot more right now, but it also might be that he has a smaller circle of people that he can trust.
Right. I believe that wholeheartedly, because I think as the president and somebody that is, I hate saying this, but somebody that is hated as much as him, you're going to have to really be that. You have to keep your circle very small and people that you trust.
Yeah.
And that's going to be your family for the most part. Yeah.
And then, there was another thing too that he recently did that he was getting some heat for kind of internationally. It didn't really make much in the U.S. news that I saw anyway. But he's closing down some bases, and he's reducing our military footprint in Europe, starting with, I believe he's retracting, I want to say 35,000 troops from Germany.
I think that's great.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And, and people were trying to be like, oh, you see what you're doing now? You're leaving that open for Russia to go in. And first of all, Germany is very strong. It is, an economic powerhouse.
Yes, Germany is up.
Yeah, and even though we had military bases there, as did the Soviets until 1988, 89, when famously Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, bring down the wall," and that was kind of marking the end of the Cold War. We're not in that type of a situation now. Like, first of all, we probably have a war going on right now and we don't realize that it's war because it's not, one-on-one combat. So we don't need
exactly
that.
What's going on, yeah.
And, one of the other things that that Trump has done was through pressure, obviously, but he's gotten other NATO member states to pay their dues for, I don't know how many years. A lot of countries weren't paying their dues either at all or not the whole thing, and the U.S. was. So, he said, hey, look, through the work that I've done with NATO, I've gotten the other member states to pay their dues. So now we don't have to bear as much of that responsibility. Mm-hmm. We can withdraw some of our troops from Germany. Mm-hmm. He's redeploying some to some other places, and a lot he's bringing home. So, again, these are things that Democrats say, we want less military spending. We want to end the war. We want to bring back our troops. and then Trump does it, and then either you don't hear about it,
Right.
or it's said in a way that makes it look like it was a bad thing.
Right.
So I see a lot of manipulation going on in the media, and I think that the reason is that, you know, there's something definitely going on behind the scenes that we don't see. So
We can talk about it. I'll spill the beans, but go ahead.
so again, you know, like whatever your level of conspiracy theory is, if you want to call it deep state, if you want to call it Illuminati, if you want to call it New World Order,
Yeah.
these things are going on, and
These
basically
things are really happening. Yeah.
tying it into our first conversation around AI, now we aren't a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people. We are an oligarchy of large corporations that are having decisions being made based off of lobbying groups that are funded by these huge corporations that are buying off our politicians, our senators, our elected officials at all different levels in state
Yeah.
and in federal levels. And they're the ones that are really running the show. You know, I think there's another great movie out there called Vice that I recommend people watch. That's
Ooh.
about Dick Cheney.
Okay.
Some of the executive producers were like Will Ferrell and Brad Pitt and stuff. Excellent movie. Does a really good job at breaking it down. Talks about 9/11, talks about all of these things. And so, you know, those are the same corporations that own our gas companies, that own mass media, that own like newspapers. So, you know, with a few exceptions like the Epoch Times, which is a really good non-biased news source,
Okay.
that kind of explains why there's so much manipulation and twisting of words and things like that going on, because they have a lot to lose if we start to wake up and realize that, hey, these people that we love so much, they're very charismatic, even, and I have a hard time saying Obama because I don't want to believe that he's part of this group, but everything
But he is
is kind
part
of
of the
indicating
group.
that he is.
Yeah.
You know, because I think he's an amazingly charismatic
I
man,
think
super
he was
well
bought.
spoken.
I think he was. I don't think. I know he
Yeah.
was bought. So it's like they're like, okay, you need to work for us. You can keep your personality. Your personality, your charisma is what's gonna drive the force. We'll keep your good image, but you're bought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think it was the same with the Clintons, the
Same.
Bushes. Actually, I think Bush Senior is, you know, he was, I believe he was the first ever director of the CIA when the CIA came out. If not, he was one of the first. You know, I think that he was one of the main ringleaders of everything that we're seeing today. So, you know, overall, I think that Trump, like every other human, has his flaws. Probably not, and maybe he is, because again, my own interaction with him personally was very limited. I was quite young. I was there as a cater waiter, you know,
Right.
so I don't know. I don't think he's somebody that I want to go and have Sunday brunch with,
Right.
and hang out with.
Right.
But I do think that he's actually doing a lot to try and protect us and protect our freedoms and rights that we have in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights.
Right.
I feel like he is the one that right now
He's
is
the qualified one. You can
is
say.
I feel like he is the one who is really more concerned about those things
Right.
than our other candidates who speak that way, but at the end of the day, like
They
I
don't do
said,
it.
are being paid off by these lobbying groups from big corporations, big
Right.
industry.
So, how did it feel when you understood that on a deeper level? Like when you went from being, oh my God, I hate Trump. This guy is terrible for the nation, or he's a jerk. He's whatever. And then all of a sudden you start to realize all these things. How does it feel to the human to say, oh my God, as a human being, like, I'm kind of wrong about the perception that I had of this man?
Yeah. You know, I think also because it happened during this lockdown, so I've had a lot of time to do a lot of self-reflection and introspection and work that way. So it didn't feel as bad. Like I don't feel like my ego took a huge hit or anything like that because I was mainly having these thoughts and conversations at home with
with
myself.
yourself.
But it feels, in a way, it feels good because I'm like, okay, I'm glad that I'm seeing these things more clearly and that I've taken the time that I wouldn't have before if I was going to the office every morning. I would have been one of those people too, just scrolling through and reading the headlines.
Right.
In a way, it's a little infuriating because I can seriously say I think I've lost almost all respect for probably 95% of journalists because they are
bought too.
Yeah, they've been
Don't
bought.
you guys? Sorry, go.
They're not even, the majority are hosts. There are no more journalists than you and I are. They get out there and they talk about things, but I think we still have this idea of a journalist who is somebody who is studied and really respected and goes out there and does the research and is in the field and comes back and writes stories and, hard stories. And now like the hardest thing that you hear is like, oh, what's the new, vegan food trend? And what are you doing with your pets for the 4th of July that don't that get scared by fireworks? It's like, where's the real news? There's a lot of stuff going on that those aren't the things that we should be talking about.
Right. Or we talk about only like the local crime.
Yeah.
That's very distracting.
It is.
Talking about the local crime is very distracting. It fills up airtime.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say something. I was gonna add to what you were saying. It just left my mind. But hold on. It was the journalist. Yeah. Haven't you guys noticed? And listen, if you are a journalist and you are of integrity, this doesn't apply to you. So if you're getting mad, then I don't know. You have your own personal thing. But if you know you're of integrity, this doesn't apply. But what I'm trying to say is, haven't you guys noticed that it's always the same journalists in every station? Like it's always the same journalist on CNN for 20 years. It's always the same journalist on SMBC Miami. It's always the same. It's very rare to have a new journalist and also covering something like really deep. No.
There's some compilations that I've seen recently online that are interesting, where like they'll pick a new hot word. I'm trying to think of an example because this video was really amazing. But basically what it did was it went through and it was even like it wasn't just all NBC anchors or all ABC or CBS or Fox. It was basically, and it was showing, because Fox is always kind of considered more Republican, more conservative.
Right,
than
we
the
don't
other
even
ones.
look at Fox, right? Yeah.
And so this video compilation had people from the local news channels from all over the country, from ABC affiliates, CBS, NBC, Fox, and then even threw in like some CNN people, and they were saying the same exact words.
Please look this
The same
up.
words, like, we are experiencing unprecedented times. That was like one of the biggest words was unprecedented. So you can do a Google search of like unprecedented video compilation, news anchors or something like that, and I'm sure will come up.
Yeah.
And it just shows you like, it is all so scripted and so planned that, we really are living in a version of the Truman Show.
We are. We really are. Oh my God. That also ties into the things that I've learned about the earth. Yeah. All right. So before I start to talk about some other shit, which is about the earth, because that's going to piss a lot of people off too. I feel like everything that I'm learning as a psychic medium, I already knew on a physical level, on a distance, but now I'm being shown all these visions that are telling me, yep, this is true. Yep, that is true. Yep, that is true. So for me, now I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna piss a lot of people off because a lot of the things that I'm learning that I thought were lies or I thought were conspiracies, they're true.
Yeah.
They're so true, and it's literally like the Truman Show. Truman! True man! No, it's too much. It's too much. Okay, so I guess we can, I just wanna stress this. As my viewers, I think that you guys are like very, very educated. So I have the liberty to say what I'm gonna say, and he knows already, and the people that I hang out with already know. So I might as well give you the lowdown. If you didn't know, the world is ran by really crazy, sociopathic, narcissistic people. This is why we are not making money. This is why they're making all the money. And those people are literally, this was hard for me to digest as a regular human being, but they praise on Satan, okay? To some people, this is old information that are watching this. To some people, this might be new information. I'm just the middleman, and I'm just like, it was very hard for me to accept that. Even as a psychic, it was hard for me to accept that, because it's hard to accept that people praise Satan. It's really, really hard. But now I see the reality, and I think I see not only the reality, like, I have this person sitting next to me as reality, but I also see the reality energetically. I see the visions. I see how it's all connected and tied. I see how, like, the media is all a lie. Like, at least everything that comes out on TV, to me, that's a lie. Even like the diagnosis right now that they're doing for the coronavirus, right? That they're spiking up again. No, that was planned. I promise you.
Absolutely.
It was planned. That's just to keep people scared and keep people at home. That was planned. You can take off your mask. You can take off your mask. And actually, that should be the next thing that we need to protest about. Like, we could take off our masks. There's the people that needed to pass from the coronavirus passed already. It's done. It's not going to be this thing that just keeps coming back. That's not true. Totally not true. That virus was completely fabricated, and it was, how do you say it? When you make something and you patent it. That virus was patent, okay? Which means it was made. Which means it was made for certain populations. On an energetic level, I can tell you that that virus was created to get rid of the lower vibrations. The lower vibrations are people that live in fear, or that have a lot of fear in their system, or just lower vibrations. So that virus, yes, it was created by a person, but that virus was also created by the divine. The divine is what gives us the ideas. This is how I can trans-channel. It's a connection. So ideas come to the human, and then they create it, right? So the divine created that virus because it was time for the apocalypse, okay? I want to make something very clear about that word. The word apocalypse is not that the world is going to end. No, not at all. The word apocalypse means that things will be revealed, okay? Woo, I got goosebumps all over my body. I love it. That means I'm right. So the word apocalypse is all about Revelations, the book of Revelations. So we are playing, you are in a game, my friend. We are in a game within a game within a game. And the game, the real game is life and evolution. That is the human game that you came here to play. This is a holographic universe. And I know things don't seem holographic, but when you wake up spiritually, you will begin to see the hologram. I promise you. And the government is going to look like the biggest joke. That's another thing, which is really a beautiful thing. Because you will realize that you cannot be controlled by them. They're only controlling you through your mind and through your logic, which brings me to the last thing I truly, truly want to talk about, which is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, people, is not these machines and that super intelligent machine called Sophia that is the first robot that talks like extremely well. That is not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not your iPhone connected to your Alexa and connected to your house. That is not artificial intelligence. okay? That's what they make you think that is artificial intelligence. This is just technology. What you're watching right now is technology. Artificial intelligence, guys, it's literally your logical mind, the left side of your brain. That's what I've learned. That artificial intelligence is not the machines. You are a human machine, and you are the most amazing, most perfect machine that has ever been created. But you are still a human machine. So your logic, your box, right? Okay, I'll help you understand. I'm gonna ground you guys a little bit because it's hard to at first understand this. So we are programmed, this is how our AI is programmed. We are programmed to automatically say the word crazy when something is out of the norm in your mind. So we are programmed to be good little boys and good little girls. When you see a little boy or a little girl act all like, oh my God, that person, your mind was programmed to call that person crazy. And that is how we tell each other, sit back down and get back with the program. Stay with the program. Oh no, I have psychic visions. Oh, something doesn't seem right here. So then your classmate, your roommate, your other robot friend is gonna say, oh, you're acting crazy, stop it. Sit back down with the program. That is the official artificial intelligence, people. So when I started talking to him and I started telling him about my findings with artificial intelligence, he was like, fuck, I totally understand exactly what you're talking about, because when people, I want you to tell them, like, when people would go to work, they're a certain way, and then would go home, they're in another way.
Yeah, so listening to that explanation that Iris just gave you, Shannon, we're talking about that, and all of a sudden something clicked, because one of the things that I had a really hard time understanding was a lot of the people that I worked with, both co-workers and superiors, I got to know them as you do when you work such long hours and you travel. You get to know people outside of the office as well. And these were some of the most amazing people that I've ever met that I worked with. Good people that had, families and that, had passions and different things that they really loved doing, and, different charities even that they worked with, that they volunteered their time with or donated to. But then at work, it was like, you'd be told you have to really be careful of your emotional intelligence. Make sure that when you're making that decision that you're thinking logically. What do the dollar signs tell you? Don't let your emotions get involved. You can't think about the 300 people that you're about to lay off and what that's going to do to them. We have to think about, where does it make sense? If we move this to the Philippines, we're going to make exponentially more money than if we were to keep it here. And so it's like, okay, and I always had a hard time with that. I couldn't disconnect my heart and my mind thinking about how this is going to impact people's livelihood, and basically just their survival.
Yeah.
So when Iris and I were speaking about that, it was like, boom, okay, artificial intelligence. Yes, because when you're at the workplace, that's what they always tell you, those things that I said, like, think logically, don't let your emotions influence your decision,
right.
And do what makes dollars and cents.
Right. They're setting him up in your mind. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. They're setting people up, because basically what that tells me is, we're gonna do some bad shit, you're gonna feel bad about it, don't say anything, you're logical, you're here to work, you're here to make money.
Exactly. And so I always had a hard time reconciling how these people could be, such good people in their personal lives outside of work, but then make those types of decisions with absolutely
Right.
no regard for the community or the people that were being directly impacted.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, That's the artificial
That's
intelligence.
the artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence is literally the brainwashing of don't be this, don't be that, don't over here, don't act yourself, cover yourself up, don't be loud, don't be crazy, don't be whatever, don't this. Look at the numbers, look how much money you're gonna get, look at the bonuses, look, and because we want love so bad, we say yes to it. We want love in the form of a comfortable house. We want love in the form of a beautiful car. We want love in the form of a nice paycheck. We want love in the form of acceptance, love, kindness, and caring from our family members.
And
So
even,
then-
at work too, because you're there with your coworkers and your boss oftentimes more than you're at home with your family.
100%.
So getting that acceptance and praise and, oh, look what Mark did. He did such a great job. And, he closed that center down with no problem and got this one up and running. And as a result, we saved. So that's, again, instant gratification.
No.
And why it's dark, because you get that instant gratification in the form of a check, or you get that instant gratification in the form of a call out, from your superior on a conference call with everybody in the company or in person or whatever. And at first it feels really good, but then later, like, I would come home and then I'm like, oh shit, I wonder what those people that we laid off are eating tonight. And so then that instant gratification wore off, and now I have my conscience that I had to live
Your
with.
conscience, right. So I hope that, this brought you guys a lot of enlightenment when it comes to the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is literally, like, I could even see it in music. Music is a huge way of controlling the masses. That's why there's only like 10 top music artists. They're all bought, and you guys are all being controlled by the mainstream everything. Now I understand why I never like mainstream anything.
Right.
I used to be like, I don't understand why everybody's listening to the same thing. Everybody's wearing the same thing, like trends and everything. We wear the same things, we listen to the same things because we want to be accepted and loved.
Yeah.
So we sell out. And for me, I was like, this is so weird. I don't understand why people keep doing that. Why does everybody want to be the same as everyone? Like, I don't get it. Because I was already looking at the world with the awareness of being different is who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but that was the brainwashing for everybody else.
Yep. I know that we're probably almost done.
I
right?
know.
But
I know,
wanted
I'm
to
like-
say one more thing.
Right, I know. We want to make sure that you guys get everything.
So when you were talking about the brainwashing of how we're being brainwashed all the time by the media and whatever, blah blah blah, and then talking about how certain things are going on, and I can't remember the example that you gave, but if we talk about like Black Lives Matters and George Floyd and the coronavirus, and it's not to say by any means that we don't believe that there is real sickness in the world, that
Right.
there are definitely racial issues that need to be addressed,
Absolutely.
all of that stuff. But this is what I would say, if you're having a really hard time thinking about, well, could this whole thing have been staged for a different outcome? And Iris was talking about how, she would see things and then realize that they're true. Our stomach is what they say is like one of our brains, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the main brains is your whole stomach and the feelings that you get there. And so when you feel something in your gut and you have a gut feeling, that is a magnetic, like that's your north. That's the universe speaking to you. That's your higher self speaking to
And
you.
goosebumps.
And so, I would just challenge you to whether or not you believe that some of this stuff might be fake or not. When you're scrolling through your social media, when you're listening to the news, when you read a headline, be aware of how it makes you feel and ask take the time to ask yourself, how is this making me feel? And then realize, is this light and positive, what it's making me feel, or is it heavy and a bad omen, dark feeling, whatever. And usually if it's on the heavier side, then that's when we have to start to ask ourselves, okay, why? Because if this is in the media 24 hours a day for weeks on end, months on end, why do they want to make us feel so bad? Like, we get it. Yes, there are people that have died, But you know what? When you look
Oh my
at the
God.
total number,
Say those facts. We gotta say those facts.
So right now everybody's like, oh, coronavirus, all these deaths. They've also come out and told us that they put on death certificates died with coronavirus, which is the main cause of death. That doesn't mean that they died because of coronavirus. So if somebody went into the hospital and was having chest pain and had a heart attack and died, if they asked, the person's spouse, well, were they coughing? If they had any symptoms that seemed similar to coronavirus, then they were putting down that that person died because of coronavirus.
Yes.
So that we've heard
Even
from
doctors
hospital,
are saying that. Yes.
But getting down to the facts,
Which is already misleading, by the way.
and you guys can do this. The last time I did it was June 10th, so the numbers may have changed. You can go to the CDC website and you can check out total number of deaths. So when I did that, I tried to pull up 2019, but I kept getting 2017 for some reason. But anyway, so year that's done 3 years in the past. The total number of Americans to die in the United States in that year was 2.8 million people. As of June 10th, 2020, 1.01, if I'm not mistaken, 1.01 million Americans had died as of June 10th, 2020. So if you're looking at the run rate, if you say, okay, June is the 6th month, we're basically halfway through the year, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, why is it that so far we have a run rate the same or a little bit less of previous years of total mortality rate, total deaths? So don't look at coronavirus deaths unless you believe that for some reason in 2020 people don't die because of cancer or heart attacks or car accidents or anything, that the only cause of death could be corona, then okay. But if you look at it and you just look at the pure numbers, no more people have died this year in the United States than they have any other year in recent history. So therefore,
it's the same.
It's being blown out of proportion. So, I challenge you to be aware of how the news makes you feel, social media makes you feel, etc. And if it's something that makes you feel angry, upset, mad, that you want to get revenge, any of those things that we know are bad energy, ask yourself why. What could the possible outcome be? And then maybe remove yourself from it for a few days and see how you feel.
Right.
And then you will start to think like, okay, well, is there a reason? People are better controlled through fear. They're easier to control when you divide and separate. So if you divide and separate based on race, if you divide and separate based on political party, whether it's Republican, Democrat, white, black, any sort of division, which is what's happening.
Divide and conquer.
Why are they doing that? Because if you ask yourself, like I said, in my travels, I realized that we're all much more similar than we are different. Is there anybody right now that you really hate, that you want to kill? Any of your neighbors, no matter how annoying they are, do you not like them because they're Cuban or they're black or they're Asian or whatever? If you don't really feel that, if you do, then those are different issues that you have to work on. But if you don't feel that, then you should think that the majority of people around you don't feel that either.
Right.
So for some reason, the media wants to spike that up.
And that's another thing. We have a lot of hate in our lineage, in our ancestral lineage, because of all the wars we've been through and all that stuff. So all that hate and weird prejudice is like coming up in the world, so we can heal it. But at the end of the day, it's also coming up in the world to be manipulated.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that. And one last thing. Can you tell us now about your new project, your new life, now that you're like this awakened, human being?
I will a little bit on a very superficial level, only because I don't want to jinx myself.
Go ahead. Whatever you like.
So I have sold my house here in Miami, which I'm very happy about. Closing should be in about another week. And I have decided to take the proceeds from the sale of the house and basically invest it in my dreams. So those of you who know me probably can imagine what that is. But I'm going to be undertaking a new business venture. And I am planning on doing this in Europe, back in Italy, where most of my family comes from originally. I've been going there quite a bit over the last few years and feel a pull. And yeah, so I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to jinx it.
Sure.
But once it is up and running, I will definitely, well, one, I hope you'll go there and visit in person.
I'm
and
staying.
Then, and then we can do another podcast
Oh my God, that'd be great.
fill in everybody. But I do think that, part of this process has been leading up to these things for me. Where, like I was telling you before, it was important for me once upon a time to move up the corporate ladder. And now what I really want to do is I want to do things where I can channel my creativity, things that I can do with my hands. I like to write, I like to cook, I like to create recipes.
He's such a good cook.
I like to entertain, I like to host people, and I like to feel part of a community, work with people of the community, talk with them on a daily basis. So all of the things that I was doing before to move up this corporate ladder were getting me further and further away from everything that I just said where I want to be and what I want to do. So that's what this next chapter in my life is going to be about, is getting back to those basics of the things that I like and what I consider to be basic humanity, having, interfacing with the people around you, your neighbors, your friends, your family, humanity in general.
That's the key. So I think the joke, was on us because we realized that so every motivation that we have as a human, and this is like 99.9% of humans, I do believe that, is that it all starts with the money and about the money. And what we realized, what we have both realized, is that it's not about the money.
No. Money's fake. Think about it.
It's the weirdest thing. It's not about the money.
No. Anybody actually have gold bars like at your house? No, I didn't think so. Like,
and what are you
money
gonna
is
do
like a made up system.
It's an illusion. It's another illusion, and I will be talking about that more. But it's literally an illusion.
Yeah.
It's fucking out of control, and it is very hard though for somebody on the other side to understand that it's an illusion, because it was hard for me to understand that it's an illusion. So I don't expect for people to get it. But at the end of the day, I think we both realized that, first of all, we are the creators. Money is always available.
Mm-hmm.
And wealth is not the billions.
Right.
Wealth is here and here and
Absolutely.
here and here. And, that's true wealth.
Peace of mind when you go to bed, waking up in the morning with the desire and passion to jump out of bed and go and do something. That to me is wealth.
Right. So the joke was on us. It was never about the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the main thing about the game of life and evolution. Like, you thought you wanted money. It's not money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want love and wellness and oneness, and it's not achieved. Again, we need it because it's part of this time-space reality, but it's not. It's always going to be there. When you understand that you are the creator of your life, money will always be there. And then you realize, holy shit, money is always here, so it's not about the money.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, guys. Well, this has been an amazing and important talk. I am so grateful for you.
Thanks for having me.
God bless you. God bless you.
Thank
Love you
you, you
so
too.
much. Thank you. I am also doing things to move out of the country, but that's also another project. But yes, my life is taking me there too, so I'm very happy about that. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you really like this, and share it with the world. The world needs to hear these conversations. And of course, a subscribe would be nice. And follow me on Instagram. I will be putting his information in case you want to get in contact with him, his Instagram information, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.